Hello everybody! Welcome back to another Vital Art session. It's Kelly Folsom here, and I'm so excited about our lessons in April this month. The first one we're going to start with is working on this really beautiful old antique blue and white porcelain sugar bowl with some oranges. So let's dive in and get started. And welcome back. We have this gorgeous arrangement up here today, this antique English jar, and I've gone ahead and I've toned my panel here with a little bit of burnt umber and some blue. This is just like I'm trying out this new primary cyan blue from Amiri Puro. So I thought that would be interesting to try, as it's supposed to be more neutral in temperature. So we'll see how it goes. Ultramarine blue is a warmer blue, and your Prussian blue or phthalo blue is generally cooler. So I thought it might be interesting to see, just experiment with this new blue. But you can use ultramarine or phthalo, either one. I just mix a little bit in with the burnt umber. Just to kill a little bit of the warmth. I kind of don't need a line here for this third, but as usual, I recommend using the thirds whenever you're first getting started to help you find your placement. You can also just start off very simply by, putting in these simple shapes. This is easy to do, right? So just to try to get my bearings on, okay, the sugar bowl is, I'm going to have that right in the middle. And then I've got these two orange wedges over here. And they're kind of shorter and more almost like a rectangle shape. And so that just kind of helps me get my drawing going. Then I could put the top on here and start to, fine tune that drawing a little bit more. But it's nice to start off with really big, simple shapes that you don't have to worry about perfect drawing right away. And that helps, maintain your proportions as you work the rest of the painting. So we want to start off really simple, really, really simple. And I should say I don't usually tone this dark, but we are dealing with a really rich dark background. So what I might do is just take a little bit of that liquid. And I should say the liquid sets up a whole lot quicker than, say, the Merige does. I'm actually out of the Merige, and I painted with liquid pretty much all the way through art school because I couldn't afford Merige. So it works somewhat similarly in that it's a faster drying medium. I do want to kind of wipe away this tone because this is going to be a really brilliant light here. And so I'm just using a little bit of that liquid. Other mediums that you could use might be like Gamblin's Neo Megulp. That's a good one. The liquid does have a little bit of an odor. However, it's not as bad as others out there. So, because there's a lot of these products now are petroleum products, and they do tend to kind of have a bit of a smell. So I do recommend, cracking a window or having some good ventilation going. So I'm just going to go through, and since I've already got this dark value down, I'm just going to take dip my paper towel in a little bit of this medium. I just like to use the same medium. I don't like to get out mineral spirits. It just keeps things simple and uncomplicated. One less supply to use. It works, it does the same thing. And since I'm just starting the painting, this whole underlayer is thin, so that's going to be okay. Working thinner to thicker. But I definitely want to wipe away where the brightest lights are, because whatever your color is, or value, color or value underneath is going to affect what you put on top. And so I added in these little green spring leaves for a little added color. I'm not quite sure yet, you know, how many of these I would have in. They've got kind of some little berries, but I think it just kind of helps pull the eye a little bit more that way. And it's always nice in a composition too if you have a combination of a big shape, a medium or smaller shape, and then some finer, more kind of little organic things. I think is nice. Just helps the cause quite a bit. All right, so I do the whole base first, getting a rough estimation of that drawing there. Not, agonizing over it, trying to get it accurate. Here, what's the angle of that little handle? And then I want to go to the other side and repeat that as best I can at this stage. You'll basically fine-tune your drawing as you are putting on paint. So I wouldn't do too much at this stage or get too finicky about it. So that's pretty good, actually. So the main thing is we want to look for the big shape of light and then leave some of that dark there for now for the shape of shadow. And same thing over here on this orange. One shape of light, one shape of shadow. So we can kind of make this shadow a little more readable. Actually, let's just go into shadow color now. So I'm going to use some cab red light, some ivory black to get just a warm shadow on this orange here. I want to paint it flat with my brush, somewhat parallel to the canvas. Make sure that that color lays down flat, not a lot of impasto. And then we've got shadow underneath this orange and these little triangle wedges here. Okay, this one is in perspective, so it's going to be narrow. There's just the tiniest little form shadow on this wedge, and it's going to curve with that shape there. I'm going to go ahead and just block in with some, just still with a little bit of that mucky stuff, brown stuff in my brush, but take some cab red light and some cad yellow deep here and get this really rich shadow side of this wedge. And I just want to look for basic shapes. Again, not agonizing over the perfection of it or anything. All right, so now I want to do the shadow shape on this sugar bowl. So it's always a good idea. Do your size and placement, getting your objects in, starting very simple and then fine-tuning a bit. And then, put in all of your dark accents and your shadows. And, in painting, we want to work dark to light as well. Now, I find kind of a nice shadow color for white is either a combination of, you can do blue and orange with white, or you can do some black and Naples yellow. This happens to be Naples yellow light. If it feels, with the black and Naples, if it feels a little too out of color, you might add in a little bit of the color here. But actually on this sugar bowl, the shadow can actually be, and this also has to do with our background, right? So the shadow, the value of a shadow is really somewhat dependent on your environment. So the value of that space, that background really kind of dictates the value of the object itself. So we have a very dramatic light, which means that, all of the lights are pretty blown out quite strongly so that we get these really strong dramatic shapes. And then the shadows, you know, drop quite a bit in value. And I'm seeing some red and orangeness here on this right-hand side, a little bit more because of the reflection of the oranges. But we want to think about that shape. What's really important is thinking about these shapes and figuring out, is this a form shadow? Is it a cast shadow? You know, if we go back to thinking about the lecture that came out in presentation at the beginning of this month, we talked about breaking things down into different geometric shapes so that we know what kind of form shadows we are needing to see if we can't quite see them clearly. So this being a round bowl, this is going to curve. This goes under, it's an underplane. And then because it's round, just like this little orange here, on my light's coming from top left, so the right hand side here is a form shadow. And you notice I just kind of keep, I don't really want the whole shadow to just, I don't know, be totally the same same mixture. So I always am kind of adding to my mixes. And then we have this kind of underplane here underneath the lip, and that actually looks a little bit darker because it's a narrower space, just a little bit. And then this is a shadow here underneath the handle, but it is so filled with reflected light from that orange. But it's always a good idea to paint the actual shadow color first and then pop in the color that's being reflected. All right, and pretty much because this little foot is tucked so far, the pedestal, the base, is tucked so far underneath that fat belly that's sticking out on this little pot. Most of that is in shadow. My light is very top light and slightly to the left. And so we really just see like a little sliver of light on the left-hand side of the foot, and then I'm going to take this cast shadow, you know, and ground, you know, just ground it down. And it's going to have a slight curve with the ellipse, right? Those ellipses. You always want to have a little tiny bit of a curve, even if you're at eye level. And then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to pop in all of these cast shadows underneath the objects as well. Cast shadows coming out to the right. I'm just going to take those relatively, maybe not that dark, a little more cad red light in there. It's a little black. Cast shadow back here, and that really frames out the light on this wedge. And underneath, flat, cast shadows. It's one of those things that really gives believability to your light and shadow work in your painting. And while I'm there too, let's carve out to adjust the drawing over here as well as over here. Okay, so now that I have, you know, my darkest darks in place, I'm going to put in some background. I want something that's a little more solid of a color back there, more identifiable as a color. I'm just going to stay really neutral though, so grabbing some of my liquid, some burnt umber. Let's see what that burnt umber looks like with some Naples yellow. And that's kind of nice. Yeah, so switching to a bigger brush, the smaller brush is nice to do these, you know, skinny cast shadows. I'm thinking that might be a little too warm though. I'm trying to think ahead and think about that. Actually might be quite similar to the color I have on the tabletop plane. So I think what I'm going to do is add some raw umber, some black, and as you'll see, if I really want to change a color, I'll kind of start mixing out of that out of that main pile I started with. If I decide, oh, you know, that's really too warm. Let's totally, yeah, kind of cool it off and neutralize it. And I do want a middle tone here. This is on the lit side. Light is hitting that black background, and this is something I often see students kind of miss a bit, is that they may just paint it in solid black. Now the shadow over here on this side may be solid black, but there is still light hitting this background, and so it's got to have some opacity in it, meaning white paint in it, for it to feel lit up. And I really want to start that color around my objects. That's where I need it the most. And again, using that background color to carve out shapes. It's almost better if your color is a little bit darker towards the top and gradates and gets lighter closer to the bottom. By that top plane that top plane is going to be reflecting light up into the perpendicular plane, just like a landscape would. And so I want to, kind of have it be slightly, let's say, darker up top, more transparent feeling. And I need all this color here. So we've got some leaves back here and stuff, and I'm not quite 100% sure yet what I want to do with that. So I'll just get in some color for now. All right, now with my liquid, I have to say this liquid, it's a lot more stickier. I think it feels a bit stickier than Merige, and it also seems to be setting up a bit quicker. So, okay, so on this side, I'm just going to do some black and some raw umber. And I'm using quite a bit of that liquid to thin it down a bit, get some flow. Kind of wonder a little bit too if this, because I've had this liquid for so long, if it's setting up a little bit quicker for that reason too. So could be. Always want to make sure that you have best supplies possible, and yeah, unfortunately I've just plumb run out of my Merige, but I thought this would be still a good teaching tool because I know not everybody in the course is using Merige. All right, so again, this is just kind of a good working procedure. Is to do your block in, your shadows, your background, and then your light. Now, I do want to get in so-called background, even though it's actually foreground, with the tabletop color here in front. Nice, it's nice and rich and warm, but there is sort of a cast shadow underneath this. And just get it on. We got to haul some bouquet. I find too, a lot of times people tend to just agonize over all of their choices and decisions. And really, a painting is somewhat a series of, you're making your best judgment as you go, but it's also a series of corrections in a way and adjustments. So, and the beauty of oil too is that we can build, light on top of dark. So I can put in, more color and light on this front edge here, right on top of that dark. Okay. And already you can hopefully see how that creates more depth of space, having a richer, warmer color up front. Ooh, grabbed a lot of that. Don't be stingy with your paint. Just load it up. We're going to use these piles throughout the rest of the painting. Okay, and then only do enough of that to, you know, get the ball rolling. You just want to do enough of your background material so that you can have room, just have something to judge the foreground stuff off of. Now the main point of this lesson is in this porcelain. And so when you're looking at porcelain, I think you have to look and see, is it a warm white or is it a cool white? Now it usually has both, again, using those complements of blue and orange with white. It cools off a little bit more on this side. And so I do kind of want to grab a little bit of that into my Naples yellow light and white mixture, which is a really nice color for ivory. And then I want to get that on there. Or you could do, if you don't have Naples yellow light, you can do 1 part yellow ochre, 2 parts cad lemon, and some white. I want to make sure I start off with a little more color. A little more color, yes. Put on the paint. So you kind of want to work warm to cool, and you know, more colorful, and then putting down more color in the beginning, allowing yourself to have some wiggle room on the value to go a little cooler and lighter. And then I'm going to start pulling in some of this gunk over here into my white mix, because right about here, remember, that's that turning plane where the form gently starts to roll around closer to the shadow. And so I want the value to be really, really close there, but it does need to adjust. And I also want to think about my brush strokes, and are my brush strokes going with the direction of the form, curving this way with this side of the sugar jar. And you know, I just try to keep wiping my brush if I have picked up anything that is a little dingy or dirty. Now, if I get this too yellow overall, it will just look like a yellow pot. So that's where the complementary colors really come in handy to, you know, we want the overall hue to feel yellowish, but we have to make sure that it doesn't just feel like a totally yellow jar. So that's where some of that, you know, blue and orange come in to neutralize, and especially here in the center where more of that cool light is hitting. I'm going to go a little bit lighter. This little foot is further away from the light source, so I'm going to go a little bit darker and warmer. See how many different ways you can use your brush. Make a brush stroke, put it down. Don't be afraid of the paint. Don't worry if it looks crude at this stage. You're going to fine-tune it and finesse it as you continue to work the painting. But I think one of the worst things you could do is start off too fussy right away. So I missed a form shadow up there. Ah, that's okay. We can paint it in now. But there is a little form shadow here on the right-hand side of that lid. Okay. Because we are running low on time, I want to get in some idea of this reflection into the right-hand side plane and underbelly of the sugar jar. That automatically brings in so much brilliant glow and color from those oranges. And I do have a little bit of titanium white here, which that is a much cooler white than my Kremnitz white or flake white. So I just want to see if that's going to stand out enough. Yes, I think that is going to do the trick. Now, I'm going to, what you guys can do too is let this set up for a little bit. You'll be so much happier if you do. So go and work other areas on the painting, putting in the orange for the oranges. Some of the green leaves are putting in some more color for tabletop color. So there's two parts to this handle. One back here is warmer and in shadow, and the one in front here is getting more light. And then we flip-flop a little bit on this side where this piece of the handle is coming in front and attaching to the front of the bowl. And so it needs to cross over. Let's get some more color in here. Cross over in front of the shadow as it attaches in front. Same thing here. This one comes over in front. We've got a little bit of cast shadow underneath this piece. So going back to my shadow color, I'm going to take some background color and just kind of neutralize this color a little bit more and just very, very gently drag some of that into that transition zone. We want to soften this form shadow edge a little bit more. Okay. Now I say wait a little bit to put on the blue because the paint is really in the beginning very, very buttery, and I mean the speed dryer does help with that, help it to start to set up a little bit quicker, but it definitely has a little bit of an uncontrollable feeling in the beginning. And so if you can kind of walk away, take a break, or work on other aspects of the painting, then that will, you'll be happy that you did. And, you know, so don't ever let the fact that, you know, I am painting these things so quickly fool you, you know, into thinking that you have to do that as well. You do want to paint with a mindset of, you know, boldness, laying down the paint, simplicity, but you also have to yield to the properties and nature of oil paint. So I am basically kind of in a way, kind of forcing the paint to do what I, you know, to get it a certain effect quicker. And while it works, it's not always perhaps the 100% best quality. So I'm going to push some of this background color into this underbelly of the pot here to kind of gray that shadow down and help push it back into space more. So the darkest and richest part of the shadow should be on that starting edge. All right, so we have form already, and the pattern is just going to give us even more form. So I'm going to take some medium here and my blue. You know, I'm kind of thinking the ultramarine would have been the better blue, but if you're in a situation where maybe you're out of ultramarine, here's a quick way to kind of ultramarine it up. And that is to put a little bit of alizarin crimson, which is a cool kind of purpley color. Because this blue is definitely cooler than what I see there. Let's do a little more alizarin. Okay. Now, the value of the blue, you want to follow the logic of the light. So it's going to be less lit up down here And, you know, adding that medium in just helps kind of give it that glaze type look. And then you want to go darker as you go into shadow, okay? If there's a pattern, a very perceptible pattern, like in this case, that's been printed or painted on, you want to kind of curve the pattern. Let's do a little black in here. Curve the pattern with the form, the shape of the jar. And then we get the lightest version of this around the highlight. So I have quite a bit more white in here, but it still looks pretty contrasted because, you know, now we're putting it in around this highlight. So I want to kind of wash out the pattern. And, you know, if you are a lover of those patterns and those details, you can really, you know, do more detail-oriented work here, breaking out of the small brush. But the main thing is I see people not following the logic of the light. And that's really where you get into trouble. So you can do more detail, less detail, looser look to the paint or tighter look to the paint, but the main thing is that you've just always got to follow the logic of the form and of the light, how the light is moving across the form. That's where it's at, you guys. That's that's the main thing. Okay, and then I'm gonna get a darker with less white version over here, because we do want to try to keep that white out of our shadows, or very, very minimal in our shadows. And this is going to give a little more, because it's darker, it's going to give a little more oomph in contrast to our glowy reflected light.